It's been a wild 2 years. Truly, truly crazy.
All right, welcome to another episode of The Collective Perspective. I'm here with Sean today. Sean, why don't you just tell everyone a little bit about yourself, your background, and currently what are you up to these days?
Absolutely. Walter, thank you for having me, first of all. Really appreciate it. I work at Campari America, and I run our white spirits. That means I effectively have the joy of kind of looking after vodkas and tequilas that within our portfolio. Brands that you may know, like Sky Vodka, Espolòn Tequila, which has been kind of up and coming. Cabo Wabo, which a lot of people have heard about in the years, but maybe not have tried. And also, we have some mezcals and some liqueurs. Ancho Reyes, which is this beautiful, beautiful liqueur out of Mexico that makes a great spicy margarita. And Montelobos, which is a great mezcal. So that's my portfolio, and have a great team kind of executing on it.
Awesome, man. And, tell me a little bit about marketing. I mean, we're kind of post-pandemic right now. We were talking, I mean, things are a little all over the map. Everyone's trying to get their footing. People are changing jobs. They're back to work, sort of. What does marketing kind of look like in 2022? I mean, we're sort of halfway at that halfway point. But what's important in marketing? What are you guys up to? What's some of the things that is in the pipeline for marketing in the hospitality industry?
I think it's been a wild 2 years. Truly, truly crazy. And I think what you found coming out of the pandemic, you're still seeing parts of that still kind of sitting through, but the ability to have confidence in what you're doing, because undoubtedly the world's changed, right? Pandemic has created a tremendous toll, whether it's emotionally, physically. We've lost friends, loved ones. You've had societal shifts at the same time, and also lifestyles have changed. People have moved locations, they moved jobs. Everything has changed, and the reality is that you can't really absorb and address all that change. But you have confidence in what you're doing, being really clear on what you're saying, why you're saying it. It's really helped. And so the process of building the tools and building the flexibility through the pandemic, all right, moving from real life adventures into kind of virtual adventures, digging deep into data, because frankly, you can't get out there and ask people what's going on. How do you use those tools and leverages moving forward? So the advancement of tools like CRM, how do we kind of really dive deep in some kind of, meta-analysis of data? That's been some of the kind of, criteria for us. And I think it's now, as we kind of look forward, is how do you kind of start building that and using that to kind of create those one-on-one relationships and really kind of bring it to life. But more than anything else, I think it's created as a need for us to not really kind of get distracted. The NFTs and the metaverse are kind of the new hot words of this year.
Yeah.
But honestly, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? I think that's something a lot of us haven't answered the question on before we actually jump into it.
Right. So you mentioned NFTs and these buzzwords. Are you dipping your toes in there? Are your brands dipping your toes in there? What are you guys up to?
Well, and it's part of every agency pitch I've had over the past year, no doubt.
Yeah.
We've looked at some opportunities, and there have been some that have been interesting to us. And you're like, all right, this could be good for us. Help explain our product, give you a little bit kind of behind the scenes. But it felt like we were just being a little bit premature and not being thoughtful enough as to what we want to get done. So I think that's where, as an organization holistically, is we are going to dip our toes, but it's going to be with a purposeful outcome that's not only just for buzz building, but has a connection back into the real world. And I think for us, we're not a software as a service. We are spirits, right?
Yep.
We have to have that physical connection. And whatever that physical connection and its digital counterpart, those have to be married and made sense. So we will be doing something, which we should be releasing about the next couple of months. We'll talk back then. But you'll see that as kind of the driving force behind what we do on my team, but also as Campari America holistically.
Got it. So you're looking obviously to get into that space. Marketing is cool, but you want it to really touch the consumer. You want it to get back to people, and touch them sort of directly instead of just living in a metaverse kind of somewhere.
I honestly, we've absolutely have kind of shorted ourselves in terms of impressions. We put something out there that's kind of a quick buzzy worthy item. But to what end? What would be the takeaway of that for consumers? And I think that's the thing that we've had to discipline enough to ask ourselves, all right, why are we doing this? And if we don't have a good answer for it, then just don't.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think people keep looking for an answer sometimes. And it's if you don't have an answer, then don't do it. And that's your answer, which makes a lot of sense and sums up things perfectly. So yeah, cool, man. So you're obviously big portfolio, Campari, very well known. You've worked with very big brands in the past. How do you? There's so many brands that we work with, and some of our festivals that we do are just coming out of nowhere. I mean, there's tequila brands I feel like every day that are coming out. There's a new whiskey brand. As someone who's been working with a lot of big brands, how do you stay relevant with all these little scrappy brands just coming from your left and your right and up and down? What does relevancy look like for you, and how do you stay relevant?
I feel like it's kind of like an old fuddy duddy, if you will, just by the fact I actually use that word. But I think it's like being staying consistent and knowing who you are and what
Mm,
differentiates you. Because I think there's a lot of like interesting brands hitting the marketplace, but they come in, and I'm not really sure if they know why they're here. Like, yes,
mm,
they want to launch a tequila because they like drinking tequila and it's fun and it looks cool. But what is your differentiator? What is the thing that consumers go say, oh, they're good about this outside of like it's a celebrity product? And
mhm,
there's some great celebrity products out there, some great brands, but I think that kind of thoughtfulness and how it kind of comes to life has been lost a little bit, and that's
mm,
fine. So for us, I think what really matters is just staying consistent and knowing what makes us different and kind of drive through that. You'll have always kind of like little pieces kind of get nibbled away at you, but in the long run, we'll succeed, and we're comfortable with that. And I think consumers are able to kind of sort through the chuff, if you will, to kind of understand like, yeah, here's what this brand XYZ stands for, and I trust them to do so. Like Espolòn, incredible liquid, fully understands kind of consumer zeitgeist right now. And they don't need a celebrity face to kind of drive their brand forward because you know what? We have some amazing master distillers who've been doing this for 30 years. And I
mm.
think that's what we lean on. And I think we have faith, and honestly, the numbers even to date back up that we'll succeed. So welcome because it creates a more interesting space, but maybe not in the long term.
Mm, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, just telling your story and consistency, and I see it all over the place that brands sometimes are jumping every 4 months, 6 months, year, new person, new this, new direction, new that, and they wonder why their sales are not going up. Consistency. I like how you're summing everything up very specifically here today. That's perfect, and it's good messaging for my audience.
Do what I can for you, Walter. Here to help.
Thanks. So, I mean, we touched upon the pandemic. Obviously, we got to talk about it a little bit. Is there anything that you guys were doing? Anything that you learned? Anything that you're going to keep with you that worked during the pandemic? I mean, everyone was switching and changing and new directions and pivoting was the big word. Any of the pivots that you guys did that you're going to continue that you learned
Mhm.
during the pandemic that you're going to continue, this year and for years to come?
It's a really interesting question. It's not one I had much of an opportunity to kind of sit down and think about until recently. It's like,
Yeah.
because you're right, it was all about pivoting. Like, all right, we're going to do X, Y, Z. It's like, no, that's no longer a viable path for you, experiential or the way the campaign you're going to do. So I think for us, and for myself, there's a couple of things that kind of really crystallized. During the opening days of the pandemic, I think everybody remembers how just dramatic that was, and like how you
Yeah.
had to kind of like, where are we going? What's happening? What it what it really brought to the forefront is being clear and understanding why you're doing your strategy and adapting the tactics to make that happen. And what we learned was an incredible set of new muscles that we had to, build, then flex to kind of get to our ultimate original strategy was. The strategy wasn't wrong, just kind of things changed around it. So like e-commerce for us, and has been, the reality for most of kind of the liquor space is that,
Yeah.
you go to Amazon, you can buy anything you want to, but it's not a shopping habit for spirits. So we've had to kind of build that muscle and kind of bring it to life.
Mm.
Everybody switched to a virtual world, but I think we learned it's like, okay, that was great about the first like what, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, perhaps. But that the desire to actually have real life connections and conversations are necessary. So let's take the
Yeah.
best what the virtual does. That is information transference. That is the ability to kind of like you don't have to fly from California to New York to have a conversation. But don't forget the fact that the beauty of the in-person experience, or the tactility of it. So how do you kind of marry those two things together?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's it's super interesting. So you mentioned events and getting people together. what does events look like for you guys? I mean, I'm sure you guys were just shut down for the 2 years, not doing anything live. What does 2022 look like for you guys for live events and activations? Are you going all in? Are you still dipping your toes? Does it look different than how it was pre-pandemic? What does 2022 look like for you guys in events?
As we came into the year, we all kind of collectively grabbed hands. It was like, yes, events are back. We're going to do it in real life and it's going to be wonderful. And I think what we found is like, there's still the reality. I have to be flexible. We were supposed to have
Yeah.
an event for Montelobos I think 2 or 3 weeks ago. But as the spike in New York was coming up, I was like, all right, we're going to push this out for 6 weeks and we're going to make it outside. And I think that for us has
Mm,
been kind of the big change is like recognizing the ability of how and when to call things. It's like, listen, this just is not going to work. Be okay with it and let's move on.
mm.
Whereas in 2020, and kind of call it February 2020, people have like lost their minds. Like, what do you mean we have to move an event by a month and have it outside? And now it's just kind of part of the course. So
Yeah.
what we are doing is like we're full in for events throughout 2022 in the summer. Both Sky and S1 have huge activations across festivals nationwide, but they're outside, they're spaced, and consumers are coming in, they're looking to enjoy themselves, and we need to show up and have a great time with them. And I think that's
Yeah.
what people are looking for. They just want to have a good time. It's been a
Yeah.
long, hard couple of years. We're tequila, we're vodka, we're good, we're fun. So let's go do that.
I like it. I like it. As an event producer, I love that. I love to hear that. That is music to my ears. I kind of want to go back to, you talked about e-commerce. What have you changed and what have you seen? I mean, obviously, Drizzly kind of built their platform for a long time. They sold for
Mhm.
like $1 billion this year. Is there other platforms being built? I mean, I know we're still kind of stuck in that three-tier system. Is there direct to consumer happening more and more for brands? What have you seen out there? And is there any specific companies that are doing some really cool stuff with getting alcohol to consumers, through e-commerce sites?
Yeah, I think what we're finding is being very interesting. And I'll kind of give you, I used to work on whiskey for a little bit as well. Some kind of recent legislation changes. We're able to kind of do
Yeah,
direct to consumer from our distilleries. That could be very well a game changer. It's still kind of being worked through on exactly how that comes to life. But for the first time, not having to go to our distillery in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky to kind of get the, Eddie Russell's private, select barrel is kind of amazing. And I think
yeah,
that can actually open up something, particularly in that space, a whole level of kind of collectability that may not have existed before. But when you look at kind of like larger platforms, it's interesting. It's like Drizzly had very clearly in their mind, we are going to disrupt the spirits route to market. And they may not have disrupted it, they certainly augmented it.
yeah,
And what we're finding now is that there's a whole series of other platforms, anything from, GoPuff to Reserve Bar to, name it. There's, there are about
yeah,
15 to 20 that are filling in niches. And I think what will be really interesting for us is like we started now kind of to go along with them, build out those niches. But where does some kind of consolidation happen? How does that really kind of come to life? I think it's probably not that far off because, there's a lot of work from our side and they're great, great platforms. But from a consumer, I mean, how many are you going to choose from? 8 different platforms to get yourself a bottle of tequila? Feels like a lot
yeah,
of work.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, I love to see the disruption. Like I said, I think we've been following rules for the last 100 years, but it's going to be interesting to see what comes out and comes up, and see how brands are going to start getting bottles into
Mhm.
consumers' hands, especially small brands. I think it's going to be super super important for these young brands coming up to say, I don't know if I can compete in some big liquor store, but maybe I could win that online. So I'm just curious to see what kind of conversations are happening and where it's going to go in the future.
Yeah, disruption is always a great thing as long as you're kind of getting ready to be disrupted and have a plan for it. I think it's something that we are now a little bit more kind of future proofed, if you will, not fully,
Yeah,
of course, but prior to the pandemic, I don't think we could have said that. Now we're like,
right.
okay, this is a skill that we kind of need
Yeah.
to be ready for. It's been a forced learning, but a good one.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's cool. And like I said, I'm always trying to look optimistic and see what good came out of the pandemic, if anything. But there's a few things that I hope will continue in the future. That's going to be good for all of us. So I mean, you touched upon the brand and the teams. I know you've been in this industry for a while. You've been doing this with teams and putting people together. And I wanted to see your kind of perspective on like how do you build a perfect team? And I know that that can be subjective in many different ways, but like, when you're trying to put a team together, whether it be marketing or sales, is there anything specific that you're looking for? I mean, I know there's a bunch of, obviously if you're on LinkedIn and you put out like a job description, it's going to have some bullet points, but what are you looking for specifically when putting together that like dream team? Um,
It's been a great evolution for me personally. Like the reality is, like when I first started out a couple of years ago building my team, I wanted people who thought and acted like me. There's like, okay, like we can communicate well, we can be really great. 1 + 1 = 3 and whatever kind of other throwaway term you want to throw in there. But as I've gotten older and just kind of like, had more experience, kind of roundabout, it's like, don't get people like you. Like,
yeah.
you don't need another you. You need somebody else who has, strengths where you don't. You need somebody who like can, think about something a different way and frankly have the freedom to be able to bring that to light. I think that's been the biggest thing is like find somebody else that complements your skill set holistically. If you're building a team of 6, you should have at least 4 different types of people in there
Mm,
and really give them the space and freedom to succeed and to speak up. As a team leader at this point, my job is to do a little, but to empower a lot. And
mm.
I hope I'll have to ask my team later on if I actually do that. But the goal is like they know what they're doing. They're successful. They're great. So let's just clear the way for them and let them have it.
Yeah, that's awesome, and I think a lot of people, even when they're starting their own business, they try to find just everyone who's like-minded, who's the same type of person, and then they start doing the work, and they're like, well, who's going to do this, and who's going to do that, and and they're like, no, no, we're all doing this one thing. But if you find I've learned the hard way that too. I partnered with many like-minded people where I was like, God, I don't need this person as a partner. I need someone who wants to do this crap for me. Like I don't want
Yep.
to do that. And they're super into it too. So I think it's interesting. And I like how you said you got a little bit older to learn that.
Yeah, it's required. Like, it feels kind of just a much better way because you're right. Like, somebody who wants to do this, you're like, oh, you're excited about that? Awesome. Because that
Yeah.
does not excite me at all. So go have at it. I'm happy for you to do it.
Yeah. For me, it's like when someone wants to do admin and numbers, I'm like, awesome. That's great. Cause I can't stand doing that stuff. It's necessary, but it's definitely not my skill set. So what else what else are you excited for in the hospitality industry? Anything new or creative that you've seen coming out? Anything that like this year you just like wake up and you're like, man, this is cool that this is happening, or that new things are coming down the pipeline? Anything that you see out there that's exciting
Yeah,
this
I
year?
think there's 2 things. I think from a macro level, you know, tragic events always cause people to kind of readjust, rethink and adjust. And I
Mm,
look at kind of like what's happening in kind of the restaurant and bar landscape now, like, and it's happening. Unfortunately, so many kind of, great restaurants had to shut down, but new ones and new experiences are coming up in their place, kind of new ideas that may have taken
mm,
a long time to break through are not able to do so because the space is there. And like, I give them full credit for like kind of running back at this, but there's some really, really interesting kind of concepts coming to life. And just frankly speaking, maybe a little bit less stuffy, but a little bit more kind of open and bohemian may not be the right word, but kind of just that idea of like just a little bit more kind of a democratic, if you will, without
mm,
sacrificing high quality. So from a macro level, that excites me to no end because it allows for brands that have been otherwise sequestered to kind of certain types of outlets now have the freedom to kind of
mm.
play on a much broader scale and have much broader kind of appeal to people. So I think that's the first one where in hospitality will be fascinating to watch for the next 5 years.
Yeah,
From
yeah.
from a generational perspective, I think that there's kind of the new generation coming up, whether you call it, the tail end of millennials into Gen Z, like the way that they're kind of approaching products, how they're thinking about their drinking journey, if you will, is much different than when I came up. Like I recognize how old I am now, but the reality of like non-alcoholic spirits sounds really appealing. I was like, if you asked me that when I was 21, I'm like, that sounds horrible. What I don't even know what that
What's the
means.
point? What's
Yeah,
the point?
but they're all in, and it's great. So that means we need to find a way to kind of rise up and kind of meet them there. And
Yeah,
their desire to kind of like drink better, even if they're drinking less, awesome. Happy for you to be able to do so and kind of live the full life that you want. But let me make sure that I'm able to kind of bring to forthright a product that is kind of fulfills your needs of drinking better. So I think there's some really cool stuff that's happening, but it's just, as long as we don't kind of get stuck looking in the rearview mirror and kind of actually look forward to what's coming down the pipeline, it should be great.
Yeah, what do you think has made that change? Where I mean, there's so many non-alcoholic brands out there now, and you say drinking better. Why do you think the bartender shift has changed towards that, or the consumer shift? What is there anything that pops out in your mind of what has helped that shift?
I can get really esoteric here if you want me to, but
Sure.
um, I think the idea of kind of like fragmented days, where it used to be like you have your 9 to 5, that's kind of what you do. And like everything was very scheduled, right?
Mm,
But whether you kind of call it the gig economy or just the reality of simply people like, you know what, I'm not going to live in a 9 to 5 world. I think it's forced people to kind of say, like, how do I kind of maximize every portion of my day?
mm,
And if that means I'm going to go out until, midnight, well, I'm sacrificing sleep, but I still want to get up and do yoga. So that means I can't really have much or anything to drink. So it needs to be really good sleep. And I think that's what's changing is people are looking, how do I kind of make my, 7 till midnight or whatever it might be, the best it possibly can be, even if it is just lounging at home watching Netflix. And I
right.
think that's been the big mindset shift of just kind of pure like maximization.
Mm. Yeah, I like that a lot, and it's interesting. I mean, you see a lot of health and wellness conversations in our industry amongst the bartenders, which, like I said, I don't know your age, but when I was younger, that was not a conversation
No.
at all. We just went hard until we couldn't go anymore, and then woke up and did our shift and just
Yep.
did it again, kind of thing. So I mean, I love the conversation around health and wellness. I wish somebody would have got me in my 20s and my 30s and said, hey, let me slow down, slow down a little bit.
It'll be okay. Just have a few less. You'll be fine.
Yeah, so I definitely learned the hard way over 2 decades, which yeah. Anyway, so listen, man, I appreciate your time here, and this was really cool, like sharing your insights on everything, and I'm glad we're going to be working with a lot of your brands in some of our events and festivals this year. So we're excited that we're back. We're excited that we're doing live events, and let's just keep hopefully things will keep going.
Indeed. Walter, thanks so much for the time. Really appreciate it. Always good chatting.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.
All right. Be well.